in which case this would be England. And again, what is the role of England internationally? Are we going to be a heavy-hitting, hard-punching power that goes around intervening in other people's conflicts? Now, I think these are really serious issues. By the way, the number of people who won't be able to vote in the leadership election if this Court of Appeal judgment is upheld, 130,000, that is the total membership of the Conservative Party. And the Conservative Party membership is also rather elderly. I mean, these are people in their 60s and 70s mostly, whereas the Labour Party these days is full of young people. So I think actually the terms of what happens in the future have completely changed.
Well, that may be the case morally.
No, I think I would say in terms of activists, in terms of people prepared to go out and get votes in.
But then that's changed, hasn't it? Because
if Theresa May went for an election tomorrow, she would win it. But Martin Kettle, I think, wrote a very good article in The Guardian a day or so ago, saying that would be really ill-advised to go for an election just now, and it would be really quite complicated in the context of Brexit. So actually, I would say that there are a few years to go before an election, and anything can happen during that time.
And are you of the opinion that those very young people who traditionally were written off as non-voters, who were never connecting to the political process, are you saying that we've seen a revolution taking place where these people now, we've seen the Labour Party have membership levels not seen since the 70s?
Yes.
Is that all changed? Have we got a dynamic change in the political dynamic?
I think a very dynamic change. And I think when Tom Watson tried to say these are the gnarled old Trotskyists, kind of forcing the hands of these poor, naive young people, I mean, nothing could be further from the truth. And I would say a very substantial number of the young people are, for example, the students who were radicalised in 2010, 2011 over the student fees issue, many of whom suffered kettling, having their heads broken, goodness knows what, going on at that time. I think this is a generation of people who didn't want to get involved in politics as it was. And I think what Corbyn has done, for better or for worse, is to attract a lot of these people back into parliamentary politics, as a matter of fact. And so I would say the outcome is extremely unpredictable.
It's unpredictable, but there's a very clear danger from everything you've described that we're going to have to go through a major implosion of the Labour Party first.
No, I would say not, because how many? You see, I think there's another factor which is insufficiently discussed, which is that many of the current members of the Parliamentary Labour Party were imposed on constituencies by the right wing of the Labour Party. And in many parts of the country, the local party did not get the local candidates they wanted, but instead apparatchiks and career politicos from Westminster were forced onto them. Now, there's a lot of talk now about deselection.
Yes.
And why this becomes a real issue is that, of course, the Tories, and one can say it's gerrymandering, but they have pushed through very extensive boundary changes which are going to be coming in. Now, once you get into boundary changes, then, of course, there has to be reselection of MPs, and there's going to be hot competition. And I would say that with a much bigger membership, the local parties are going to say, look, and a new NEC after September, they're going to say, well, actually, we want the local working class trade union candidates that we want, and not people who've never spent a day outside of Westminster, as was the case in the past.
Well, look, Matt Rack and many others, more recently, and even Jeremy Corbyn has sort of indirectly suggested that all those members of Parliament who were involved in the coup against him and the mass resignations should all be up for re-selection.
Well, I think many of them will be. See, this has been aptly called the chicken coup. And this is probably the least successful coup of modern times. Really, they completely made an absolute hash of it. And it was clear that it was a complete hash in day two, when it was clear that Corbyn wasn't going to budge. And he didn't need to budge. And, of course, that was the point on which he won in the courts. Let's not forget. So, so on the issue whether he is the candidate, well, he's a candidate. And the fact of the matter is that the only candidate against him is Owen Smith.
So just so that we can get some clarity on the way forward, how do you see this all? We've got a complete change a regime change at the NEC come September.
Yes.
But prior to that, we're going to have had the elections, won't we?
I doubt it very much. No, I don't think.
You don't think there risk doing that, or isn't it timetabled for that?
General election, you mean to say?
Yeah. No, I'm talking about the
leadership election.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Yes, of course. I think at the moment, I mean, nobody can predict anything at the present moment, but I would say, if one wants to put money on something, well, I think Jeremy at the moment is a much more convincing candidate for all his faults.
So he wins. Let's say he wins the leadership election.
No, I think the September conference could be a really galvanising conference. Now, question is, where do the members of the Parliamentary Labour Party go? And in your introduction, you raised the question of the SDP in 1981. Actually, of course, the SDP was some rather big figures. I mean, Shirley Williams, Roy Jenkins,
yes.
David Owen, Bill Rogers, gang of four, really significant people. There is nobody of that kind of stature, I would say, in the right wing of the Labour Party.
So you'd see a split?
Plus people, well, if they dared, I mean, I don't think they would go anywhere. And many people say, well, actually, a lot of them on policy issues would be happier in the Lib Dems anyway.
Yes.
I mean, if there was any future in the Lib Dems, of course, which there may not be, is there room for another party? Of course, if, let's say, Owen Smith wins, let's say that the Parliamentary Labour Party, after a long period, kind of wins, could there be a split in the other direction? Well, I think the big unions, Unite and Unison, which are huge unions, which are supporting Corbyn, well, there might come a point at which they say, well, look, we've had enough of this. Let's have a real left-wing socialist party. Forget the other lot. They can go where they want. And, So I think there's more than one.
There are two big options that indicate a massive split in the Labour Party.
Well, there is a split already.
Yeah.
There is a massive split already.
And if we follow what you're suggesting, you may see more of an exodus to the Lib Dems or even the Tory Party by some of the Blairites.
Well, I think there are people going the other way, of course, and there have been some interesting defections from the Lib Dems to Labour recently. Labour's been doing rather well on local authority by-elections recently. Tory Party has some very significant problems. And I think one reason that Theresa May is not totally secure is that the terms of Brexit are absolutely up for grabs, and this is such a hot topic within the Tory party. And of course, in a sense, well, she's got Boris Johnson there as Foreign Secretary.
But isn't Jeremy Corbyn also in a quandary over this issue?
Yes, of course.
He's had to be ducking and diving to avoid accusations that he is partly responsible for not having galvanised the working class vote. On the one side, but then he's coming out saying, look, Brexit is Brexit, we have to accept it and work with it. So, I mean, where does that leave him and his supporters?
You see, I would say he's got a very convincing case that he travelled all over the country, 2,000 miles, I think he says, actually was very, very active campaigning for Remain. A higher proportion of Labour supporters voted for Remain than did Conservative supporters, as a matter of fact. So I think some of the allegations, some of the accusations against Jeremy Corbyn actually are not very well founded, as a matter of fact, on that issue. And there is a kind of democratic point here, that there was an all-out campaign on the question of Brexit, with the government putting huge resources. This is why Cameron resigned immediately. I mean, his position was completely untenable. And I think on the Conservative side, one sees the end of Michael Gove's career, which seemed to be going somewhere at some point. I think we have a Conservative cabinet which does not look all that stable. And one's got international factors, like the huge strains on the EU, any case, whether Brexit happens or not. Well, Brexit will happen. Plus the spectre of maybe having Trump as the next president of the United States. So I would say the whole world actually is in a state of dynamic turmoil at the present moment, not just the Labour Party.
Well, on those very profound words, I'm afraid we're out of time. Professor Bill Bowring, it's been, as always, a real pleasure to have you here on Islam Channel. Thank you very much for joining me.
Yeah. It's a great pleasure too. Thank you.